This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. You are listening to program 20, 5 ways to step out of the center of your business. We all know someone, and maybe that someone is you looking back at you in the mirror, that has become the solution. It's hard to be that person. Been there. It's hard to work for that person. Been there too. But why? Why is it so hard? There are a lot of ways we can sugarcoat it, and it just comes down that we don't become better leaders when we do that. There are a bunch of reasons. Some include, it's my vision, so no one else gets it. Or, I'm the service, so we're going to do it my way. Or even, no one can do it like I can, so there. While we're responsible for the success of the business, there is always a level of pressure because our responsibilities include making sure that the bills are paid, payroll is in the bank, and that there is a profit. There is also the responsibility that the product is delivered, that customers pay, and that they're satisfied. And lastly, it's about how each person shows up to do the work. Each of these areas overlap with each other. So to keep this program to an hour, we're focusing on how each person shows up to do the work and to be fulfilled. As decision makers, we, the leaders, set the culture. We decide what is allowed and tolerated and what isn't. If we walk around and we make comments that we will do something so it's done right, the team will quit trying. If we walk around saying no one understand, no one will try. If we only allow one way, our way, the team will quit trying to come up with new ideas and solve their own problems. They will look to us. When we put ourselves at the center of everything, we become the bottleneck and on call 24/7. Stephanie Sims and I are going to talk about 5 ways to step outside the center of your business right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Hi, Stephanie. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great, Jess. How are you?
I think we should just jump in. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about is a question. How does this concept of becoming the center of everything, how does it manifest when our identity becomes intertwined with our roles?
I see it a lot with people who are looking for money for their business, people who are trying to sell their business, even people kind of in early stages, when they get those wires crossed and they become their business, it can be great when the highs are high, but boy, is it hard when the lows are low. So it's dangerous on both ends, right? It's dangerous on the business end because then you become the business and you represent pretty risky proposition for anyone who might invest with you because they say to themselves, oh, but if she gets hit by a bus, my investment is gone.
I think that's the biggest manifestor is when our definitions of what we want of our business changes. So we look at our business differently and recognize we're on the path to burnout, or we're already burnt out, or we actually hate our employees. And don't lie to yourself. We've all been there. Sometimes it comes and goes, but when it stays forever and ever and ever, and whatever's being tried doesn't work, there's something else here that really becomes worth looking at, and we've got to dig deeper into that. So that manifestation really are feelings. They're feelings of anger and concern and confusion on one side. And then from the outside, I always feel like we're coming up against obstacles, or being told no, or our ideas get shot down, and because like what you were saying, in buying a business, when the person is the business, it's a much riskier investment to whoever is going to take it over.
Sometimes those no's can be coming from inside too. For example, if we're having trouble keeping staff, right? If people don't want to stay working with us, or if we have, you mentioned Jess, but if we have kind of objective information that people are not enjoying their jobs, that people are complaining a lot, sometimes that's data that says, hey, you know what? There's a problem. Like you said, there's a problem here. And sometimes we get that external data And we're kind of hesitant to look at it ourselves, right? We're like, oh, well, they must all be jerks. Oh, well, they're not committed.
What you were saying is we're not defining these problems as my pen ran out of ink, or I'm going to be late for a meeting, or I'm not sure how I'm going to get payroll paid this month. It's not those types of things. It's more of the things we know there's a problem and we're trying things. All it seems like is more problems keep cropping up. And that's what tells us we're not at that root cause. And so this manifestation, everything that you've said and everything that I've said comes down to how do you dig in to really hold that up? Because what is the root cause of all of those things that we were just talking about? It's the leader at the center. Yeah. And well, okay, so let's talk about center for a minute, because as an owner of a business, as a founder of a business, we might be the center of the business, but that's very different than all of the business coming through us. And I think we should talk about that for a little bit in terms of clarity around, we're talking about when we are the faucet, right? I mean, if you think about your internet connection. So if we are at the center and everything is funneling through us, are we as fast as Google Fiber, or are we as slow as dial-up? What is that actual impact in our business? So that's actually, I think, a good thing to think about too, because if we're in the center and we're not seeing it and we have all these problems, it could be because everything has to come across our desk.
People often find themselves in that situation, and like you said, they only recognize it when they're feeling the pain. Like, okay, it's 8:00 at night. I'm still not home with my family. I'm the only one here. Why am I the only one working hard? Or sometimes it manifests by, how come nobody can make a decision on their own? That's a really sneaky one that comes up. And I've seen people who've suffered from that. And they honestly thought the problem was their employees. And they didn't recognize that what was happening is they had created a culture and just a process within their business that made it impossible for anyone to make a decision other than them.
When that happens, in addition to everything that you just said, that's when disengagement occurs. That's when turnover increases. That's when the best talent goes away, because it's wilting. It's lacking the nutrients and the space to grow and bloom.
And what I find interesting is a lot of times those situations are things that we've just grown out of. It used to work a certain way. When we were small, when we had a small team, maybe it worked that everybody came and asked for your signature on a PO. That may have worked great. But now that you're 30 people, it's not going to work. Sometimes you just need to look at your processes. But sometimes the problem is a little bit deeper, and you and I have had this, we've had this conversation before. Sometimes it's us, right? Like sometimes it's just, I don't want to let go of that because it makes me as the founder of the company feel important, or it makes me have the control I need, or it makes me essential. And let's be honest, sometimes as people, as individuals, we want to feel like people are counting on us and we are the center of our business and we are the only person who can decide.
Right. And that's incredibly limiting. And that pain or those questions or those feelings that are coming up are directly related to the limits of what's been imposed. And I love that you said culture and process, because when we're thinking about this, our culture is set by every single action. And some people think they can set like mission, vision, values, and then their company is going to be good. Well, the funny thing, I'm like, and they consider it like an afterthought, yet all that time and energy up front really makes such a big difference in the sense that we understand what the problem is we're solving. We understand how we're supposed to go find the people that actually need our product, and we're going to have the rules of engagement of how all of this works. So with all that in mind, it's really easy to, I shouldn't say it's really easy because none of this is really easy, but it's easier to be able to have something that you can articulate, to take out of your brain and communicate it to another person. So there's this concept of, what am I thinking? Can I write it down? And is it clear? And does somebody else understand it? And can they repeat it in their own words back to me in a way that makes sense to me as well? And I get that they get it. That's the thing. I get that they get it. And if there's too much complexity, they're not going to get it, or I'm not going to think they're going to get it, or they don't really know what we're talking about and they don't even know how to start. And so it comes down to that clarity piece. And if we were to then think about this, and mission, vision, values really is the first step to taking everything funneling through the center, the leader or leaders in different places within the organization, and actually turning it into, like, I equate it to having a hose that you turn on and you go out and you water your plants, or you have the hose with the holes in it that you have the little drip hose, so it's doing what it needs to do. The water's still going through, but everybody's getting what they need without having somebody at the end directing all of the output. And making that shift is really what we're talking about. And the first piece of that we've already started talking about is the vision, the mission, and the values. What values are showing up and understanding them. So I'm curious, what's your experience with personal values versus work values, Stephanie?
I think one of the symptoms is if someone asks you this question and you can't identify the difference, right? Like you're like, well, I just want to treat people right. Well, okay, I don't think lots of people out there are in business to treat people wrong. That's a personal value. It can also be a value of your company if you think that it's central to everything you do. And this is where it's really interesting. And I've really enjoyed working with you, Jess, because you've shown me all kinds of cool stuff about this. But the way you decide if it's central to your business is not only does it apply to me as an individual and as the founder, but is it the way that I want everyone in my business to interact with each other, with our customers, with our vendors, with our investors, right? Because if it's not central to all of those interactions, then it can be your core value as a person, but it may not be a core value of your business.
The conversation that I have actually had over and over and over again is, but especially starting out, I'm the only person. I'm doing some bootstrapping. I'm going to think about this and I'm going to do this growth. So the company's values are my values. Well, the thing is, as soon as somebody else comes in and they don't live the values exactly the way that I do, in my way, the way that it's always been done to find new ways to grow, there's nothing but disappointment afterwards. Nothing but disappointment afterwards. And there's a lot of frustration. And we can avoid the growth issues that come with that because we're stepping aside and saying, these are the values of my business, and this is how I'm going to show up, because I'm going to model this for everybody else. But the business is the business. And yes, I'm the line leader, but at the same point in time, I'm setting an expectation of what's allowed and what's not allowed here. What is okay and what is not okay? Because not only, and this is my favorite part of the conversation, is that not only might everybody needs to have the company values that they work for be able to line up with their personal values, we also have to have the same meaning. So number 2 really is the same meaning, and how do you get to that? And when we're the center, we got to get out of the center to be able to create shared meaning, because nobody thinks like us. Nobody's had the experiences of us. And our business is its own entity. We want it to grow and have a life of its own. We want it to have a purpose to serve, to give us the lifestyle and the freedom that we want. Yet at the same point in time, we don't want to be on call 24/7. And by the way, if you think you do, talk to me in a year. Maybe not even a year, right, Stephanie?
Exactly. I think that's another place where we do tend to get kind of caught up in our own heads. If you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, well, nobody in my company treats my customers the way I want them to. You know what? That's on you. That is not because you have crap employees. That is because you either have not done a good job explaining to them how we treat customers, meaning mission, vision, values, or you haven't been hiring to your mission, vision, values, and you've hired people who just don't share them. It's like trying to find someone who provides care to your child who has a totally different idea of what it means to teach your child to be respectful. If you don't investigate, what does respectful mean to you? Because to some people, respectful means polite, right? To some people, respectful means understanding, compassionate, listening. If you got someone who's over here and understanding, compassionate, listening, and you think respectful means polite, you guys are never going to get the same results. And you're going to end up conflicting with each other because it doesn't mean the same thing, right?
There are so many things that are subjective, and we just assume people are in our brain. We assume people know what we mean even though they're coming from a completely set of experiences. And it's that assumption that creates the first rift in a foundation and can derail and create inefficiency and ineffectiveness and a lack of profit. I mean, there could be sales declines, there could be just decline, going down into the red, that kind of stuff. And that's really important to be aware of and to think about, because as we are the center of the business, meaning we've set the strategic plan, we've thought about what we want our goals to be, we understand what our vision is. Every single person I work with has vision, mission, values. And I was this way at first too. So I'm putting me working with myself and going through this process at the very beginning, I realized that my mission was mishmashed with my vision, which was mishmashed with my values. And when they're mishmashed like that, they can work for a while, but there's still some limitations there because the essence of what they are and how they're communicated changes.
And this is something I only discovered when we worked together, because full disclosure, Jess actually was awesome and she helped me figure out my mission, vision, values. And until you take the time, so you invest the time actually to really get clear on the distinction, it is a mishmash. And then even, and I just want to put a pin in the fact that we're going to talk about skills because we haven't talked about that yet.
Yep, that's number 3. Yep.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yep.
Because even if we have the skills, if we're trying to communicate something that's not clear, it doesn't matter how skillful we are because it's not clear to us.
And that actually, when you take the vision, mission, values, and you have the shared meaning and you're getting it out of our individual heads and we're able to communicate it in a way that somebody else understands it as well, it sets up the stage for people who are recruited, for people who are already around, to be able to buy in and go, I know how I contribute here. I know how I can be fulfilled in my job and know that I'm doing a good job at what I do. That's all feely so far. And to take that one step further, it's when we're hiring talent, when we're expanding our team, when we're shifting responsibilities, when we're asking people to wear more than one hat or 3 hats or 5 hats or whatever the case may be, asking everybody to pitch in. If we don't know the skills that the job needs to have to be done correctly and completely for the vision, mission, and values, then also there's another crack in the foundation of, well, we're going to end up taking it on because nobody can do it like we can. Well, we never asked or did an assessment to find out if there was an interest and the ability to do the job was actually there.
And that's really funny because it comes back also to the first problem we noted.
Yeah.
Which is when we put ourselves in the center, we are not more than likely at our best and highest use.
Right.
So here's the deal. Everybody has a sort of innate set of skills. Some people are better at communicating. Some people are better at brainstorming. Some people are better at solving complex problems. We all have a certain set of skills that we come to the table with, but we also need to be able to identify our desires and our personal values so that we get people working on the things where their skills and their values within our organization really line up. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're talking about. Maybe some of us have focused on that for our employees, but we've never turned that lens on ourselves and said, oh, wait a minute, what's my best and highest use? And it's not to be the bottleneck. It's not to be out there watering the lawn like you were saying every day. My best and highest use in my business may be providing my service, for example. Mm-hmm. But my best and highest use in my business may also be getting the 30,000-foot view and finding the people who are going to really be the best at providing my service. You can only do that when you take yourself out of the middle, because if you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off because you've got 50 things to do, mm-hmm. It's pretty sure that at least half of the things that you have to do are not your best and highest use.
That's actually the quickest way to burnout, I think. People get tired quickly. They start having other health issues manifest. Problems pop up in their personal relationships in addition to their work relationships. There becomes this more reactiveness and defensiveness around. And so if that's actually occurring, or when that does occur, just take a stop and go, okay, step back. Something's out of place, and we've got to look at what the skills are to be able to move through that. And I liked that you talked about our innate skills versus the ones that we can build. 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and coaches on teams, they say, you're only as strong as your weakest link. sure, there are people who don't perform, and sure, there are people that are going to have to be let go, and sure, there are people that are just not right in the job they're in, but they may be the right person in the wrong job. So we all have strengths. Every single link is an employee in our organization, and each one of us has strengths and each one of us has weaknesses, and part of pulling ourselves out of the center is to be able to assess those skills and mitigate the weaknesses, the places that we can build strength, and develop that in our people, and at the same point in time utilize what they bring and how they bring it to fully represent and get the product out there and get the mission fulfilled.
When we don't have the mission, vision, and values in place, or we don't personally, even if we, I think we should have them in place, they should be written and things like that, but even a lot of times they're just not clear in our own heads.
Right.
And we build a team around feelings, which there needs to be compatibility. I agree, there needs to be some sort of chemistry, feeling that you can work with people, but that's not always enough. And what we end up with is, instead of starting out as we mean to go on, which is simply, I want to run my business based on these 4 values.
Yep.
For example.
Sure.
We start out like, I just want to make some money, and we get distracted by all these things, and all of a sudden we have to have these conversations at a point in time where it's actually really painful, because maybe we've already got 10 employees and we know things aren't going well. Back to the symptoms that we talked about at the beginning.
She's so excited. I don't think she likes this topic at all.
It's tough. I'm trying to control myself, but it's hard.
Me too. I get it.
but like, we go back and we start having those really painful symptoms, like people are leaving, or we're losing customers, or vendors hate us.
Right.
They become really painful. And so to anyone who's early on, the only thing I would say to you is, this sounds like it might be something you could wait on. The truth is, do not. You cannot wait. Jess and I are both shaking our heads, and we're like emphatically in the mics, do not wait.
And here's the other thing. The vision and the mission and the values, how all of those things play into every process directly affect your exit plan. And that's actually something that I think a lot of people forget. They do the exercise, then they set it aside, and they hope they remember it when they're thinking about their exit plan and moving towards that. And this is going to be part of it. What we're really talking about, Stephanie used the term decision making, and it's a big part of it. And part of decision making is what problems are around and how are we going to handle them, and making the correct decision about what solution makes sense right now. I've got a personal story, and I won't out this person, they may not want to be, but I was having a conversation with somebody, and they were discussing a personal issue with me. She says to me, Jess, no matter what, I'm going to do all the research I can, and then from that research, I'm going to make the best decision, even if it goes against what I need for my family right now, because in the end, that's the best decision according to my research. And I was like, well, that's one way to do it. And that was the end of the conversation. I'm like, well, I'm not going to change your mind. Thank you for sharing it with me. I have some other ideas, at which point in time you're ready. And she came back to me, and she was really burnt out. And she said, I did all this research and I made this thing, but nobody else around me is going to go along. And in fact, they're all against it. And I really look at it, it's against me too, and what I need too. And I said, okay. So in her own words, she said, so please help me. Those aren't the words that came out of her mouth, but it was like, so please help me. And the outcome was just to think about it. So we said, what really is the problem? And what decision really needs to be made? And I asked a lot of questions, and we were able to shift what the perceived problem was to a better set of questions that uncovered the real problem. And in fact, while it was similar, the revelation came down to the fact that she needed to do what was right in that moment at that time, knowing that it wasn't forever. And that's the other, taking ourselves out of the center of our business. Every decision we make can always be iterated differently, and it can always be changed later. We do not have to be invested in the outcome so much that it's to our detriment.
When we have this mentality of being the center of the business, we also fall into perfectionism and into this notion that we can't make a mistake, and into this notion that, well, but I'm the leader, and so I never show emotion, and I don't get upset, or I don't say it was my fault, or I'm afraid almost to go through the actual things that are going to make my business better, which is creating a spirit of vulnerability that says, hey, you know what? We're just going to try this. Because if you create a culture that says to people, in our business, it is perfectly okay to try things. You can put guidelines around it. It doesn't mean you have to sign a blank check to somebody, but you say in business, it's okay to try things in your domain of strengths because you think that it's going to work. Mm-hmm. It's okay for it not to work too, but we're going to learn from those experiences so that the next time we try something, we can get closer to the target. Mm-hmm. That's a very different culture than in this business, we do what we're told and we don't make mistakes.
Right.
It's not the same. And the problem is it comes from you. You have to be able to model it, because if you're out there saying, yeah, no problem, it's okay to make mistakes. And then every time something goes wrong, they hear you like slam the office door and break a coffee cup. You're not living it. You're saying it, but you're not living it.
We may have a skill and we may have a strength and we may know everything that there is to know until tomorrow when something new comes out. And there's always research being done. There's always changes in the economy. There's always changes in what technology is going to do and how our customers want to interact with us, how we deliver our products, what are the steps to get it from idea through R&D to something that's a prototype out there and iterated to the point that it can be mass produced and help as many people as possible. And all of that comes from learning, which is, I think, the ultimate outcome of our fourth way to get out of the business, which is to problem solve. And what you were talking about, Stephanie, of modeling it is including other people in this process so they see what it means and they experience what it means to own an issue, go through the motions, choose a solution, and maybe make a mistake or get to the outcome and recognize we've got to repeat to do it even better. Oh, I see a way to go further. Oh, I see a way to make this more. And I think that that's a really, really big part of what we have to consider in our skill building. First and foremost, I said skills in general, and that's just to get the jobs done and the things you need for your roles. There's also the soft skills. And the biggest soft skill that we can bring into our business is problem solving, which includes decision making. And I actually have it's 5 steps because it's 4 things and make it right. So was what I found. And the 4 steps really to being able to make good decisions and solve the problems that come up around the decisions that need to be made are to identify what's going on that we don't like. What is it? What is the issue? What is the problem? What is the obstacle? What is the barrier? Or what do we think it is? And how do we gather the information around that? Step 2. Step 3, go through the what ifs. What if this? What if that? What are the scenarios? And Stephanie's phrase that I'm going to use right here is see it through to the end. Right? That's what I've learned from Stephanie in all of our work together. See it through to the end. And then create the plan. What is the plan to address the symptom, to address the problem, to see some sort of a change? And then, no matter what the outcome, make sure that it's right. And this comes back to, we can apply this to every single role and every single one of our positions across our business. And it does start with us as leaders. If we don't do it, our people aren't going to do it. And if we don't have this skill, our people really, even if they have the skill, they're not going to show it.
What we do is we create a bunch of Band-Aids.
Yeah.
Right? Because then what we're in the mode of doing is, it's like the little boy in the dam, right? Oh, there's a leak. I'll stick my finger in it. Oh, there's another leak over here, right? And nobody's ever like, but why is the water rising so fast over there? Eventually you run out of fingers and toes, and then what happens? Well, you get knocked down by the water anyway. I love that process, and obviously you and I have talked about it quite a bit. Some of the things that we can also consider is building our muscle of self-awareness through that process. Is it step 3 where you talk about
the what ifs or the create a plan?
Yes, the what ifs. It's where you talk about the what ifs because I think where it's easy for us to go in that situation is like, oh, well, it must be the employees. Right. So you notice that it's a problem, and then you get some data and you're like, okay, yeah, it's really a problem. It's costing me money, or it's costing us time, or we're not being a very cohesive team here. It's easy to jump to a conclusion and to say, oh, I found the solution, as opposed to asking yourself the question, And this is a technique that you and I have both seen employed elsewhere, is like some people say the 3 whys, some people say the 5 whys.
Right.
But when you get to the point where you think you have a solution or a cause for the problem, the best thing you can do is ask yourself, but why is that? So if you work it through and you say, well, the problem is that my employees don't do a good job, then the immediate question is, why?
Right.
Well, because, and if the answer is because they're whatever. A personal characteristic of them, then ask yourself why. Why are they like that? Did I teach them to be like that? Were they like that before they came to work for me? Both of those things are things you have control over, right? You control, like you said, Jess, you control the culture of your company. You control the processes that are used. And you also control who you hire and who you don't, who you fire, right? So there are always solutions, but you have to keep digging to actually find what the real problem is. Because a lot of times it's too easy to put a Band-Aid on it and pretend it's not a problem. And then whoosh, you get washed away by the flood.
And then what is our default response? Is to go back and say, everything's going to go through me. And we go back to that same thing in the middle, where if we're able to stand aside and say, here's the business, just like what you were saying. What does it look like? Why is this happening? And being able to be really honest about it with ourselves and the other leaders that we work with in our organizations, then we can go, okay. And then it starts with us. This concept of those are the steps of problem solving, but everything you said, Stephanie, plus us, we have to choose our behavior, and we have to decide our behavior is going to change before anything within our organization will.
Right.
And that's, I think, really what this comes down to. The 5 ways to get out of the center of the business is to walk the walk, talk the talk, whatever your phrase is, but really being true to what we have and what we want, and actually being transparent about it and not telling all the secrets and talking about negotiations, because that's overwhelmed for our team. But being transparent, especially in here's what we do, this is where we're going, and here's why we do what we do. So go do it. And if you have, I want to hear your ideas. Yeah. And I'll bring ideas. And you'll bring ideas as the leaders within the organization.
It does require us developing a willingness to appear as not a typical leader. And some of this is generational. I think some of this depends on when you grew up and how you learned about business and things like that. You know, when you've got in your mind that a big leader, a very successful leader is someone like General George Patton, it's kind of hard to be vulnerable. And that's okay. I'm not saying that you need to go out and expose all your deep inner thoughts the first day, but find little ways when you're in that problem solving process, find little problems that could actually be made better or solved by being just a little bit vulnerable.
We don't have to be vulnerable with everybody. Vulnerability is a muscle. Being willing to say, I don't know, or being willing to say, I think I know, those are 2 first really good steps.
For example, I can think of a team.
Yeah.
You're trying to convey to a team why it's so important for us to have the shop looking really nice because there's an investor that's coming.
Right.
You could approach it like a general, like everybody get to work and it needs to be done right away. And this is the time. You could also approach it by saying, I think this can be a great opportunity for our business to move forward.
Yeah.
Because we'll be able to hire more team members. And again, it's got to be cohesive with the vision, because if they don't understand that you're trying to grow the company to 100 people, they're not going to understand why it's important to get an investor or why it's important to hire.
That's right.
If they're on board with your vision and they want to go there too, and you say, hey guys, this is a great shortcut to help us get there, then you probably will have more ideas than you know what to do with as to ways that you could make it better. Because like you always say, Jess, you cannot be the only person who knows. There's always going to be something new that's going to happen that somebody else's idea may be a better solution for. But if you don't avail yourself of that info because they don't want to talk to you or you're not listening to them, right, it's going to be really hard to get there.
Being in the center is the quickest way to be walking at the front of a line of 1.
Right, exactly.
And that's really what these 5 ways to get out of, basically they're 5 ways to get out of our own way. We got to get out of the center of what we do, because while we're still the line leader, we want people to be coming with us. And I think that's the biggest takeaway here. And that's a great way to punctuate what you just said. especially if we have a culture of everything going through the leader or leaders, and it's a bottleneck, and we've got Google Fiber, but our people are only allowed to use dial-up speed because we only have so many hours in the day. Not only are we ineffective and inefficient, but we've got to take it one step further, and we've got to say, well, these guys have to learn. And if I'm going to walk this walk, and I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to have these values and skills that I want them to learn, I cannot be around when they make the mistake. They've got to make the mistake, and they've got to figure it out on their own. And guess what? Most of the time, if we have a culture of not doing that, of letting everybody come to us, they're going to keep coming to us. And we're getting calls, we're getting texts, we're getting emails, we're going to be having meltdowns in our office, and all kinds of things that we don't need. So take a vacation and take a day off in the middle of the week. And maybe it's not a day off, but maybe it's the thinking day. Maybe it's where you're doing something else and you're doing some sort of strategy and you don't want to be involved, and let the mistakes happen. Because we have to think to ourselves, what's the worst that can actually happen if we unplug for one day? Nothing irreparable is going to happen in one day.
If you're really freaked out by it, if a day seems just too long, plan a conference for yourself. Go to a networking meeting that lasts the morning only. If that's the little step that you need to take, it's much better to do that than to just say, oh, it's not possible, I can't ever do it, and to continue being the center of your business.
We're going to go to the lowest, smallest baby step we can of going to a networking meeting for several hours in the morning, okay? We come back to the office and you're bombarded by people. You haven't even gotten out of your car, and it's like a mob has surrounded you. This is a pretty good clue. You need more of those. And what could the first question be? It could be, what do you think? What do you think? How would you handle that? Because now what you're doing is you're asking them to speak up and use their voice. You're asking them for their ideas, and you are able to assess where each person is in that skill, so you can help them with the 5 steps of problem solving to help them be able to do this a little bit more. And now you're modeling, asking the questions. By the way, it will come back to you, because not only do I do this with my clients, and they get it, and they go, okay, here it comes again. But Carter, he goes, what do you think, Mama?
I love it.
Right? He's modeling it. And so adults might not do it as quickly, but I know it works because they're making changes, and they smile at me knowing, like, clients will be like, yeah, okay, I know what's going to come out of your mouth. What do you think? Because what am I doing? I'm modeling. How do you solve your own problems? I'm modeling what does it take to think about the business in a way that you're able to do this and handle those mistakes and those errors to build the teams that you want. And my job then in those places is to hold the space and have a safe place to know I'll shine the light on anything out of line with your mission, vision, and values for these things. And I think that that's a pretty big part of it. So take a break. And I have to tell you, I have to call the kettle black here because I really don't. Not on call all the time, but I take like daily mini vacations instead of long. I'm never gone for 2 weeks. I'm never even gone for a whole week. So that's something I'm going to challenge myself to see, can I do it and do I like it? Because I don't even know if I would like that, but I think taking those types of breaks are really important.
It's a great indicator of where you are. Yeah. Because here's the other element of that when we look at the risk side is nobody knows what could happen tomorrow.
Right.
And so if you are the center of your business and God forbid something happens to you and you're hospitalized or you're laid up for 2 weeks, does that mean that your business can't function? Because that's probably not what you wanted when you decided to create this business. While it's awesome to be part of the team and it's awesome to have the energy around you and all of that, if the business actually literally cannot survive without you, that's a great indication, like you said, Jess, that things really need to change and pretty quickly. Not just because it's making your life miserable, but because those things could happen to us. I could break my leg and I could be laid out for 2 weeks.
That's right.
That's no good.
And this is what happens when I get to my coffee place in the morning and there's 20 people in line in front of me instead of 5. That is the least of our concerns every day. And we don't think about it. We just get in that moment and we get frustrated. Well, what's going to happen if we don't plan these things for our business? All right, you guys, this has been, I didn't even stop to take a station break. We just kept going and going. And poured in all of this stuff. So what are the 5 ways to get out of the center of your business? So step out of being the bottleneck, step out of being the go-to person for everything, and understand and be able to articulate clearly and simply the vision, mission, and values, number 1. Number 2, be able to create shared meaning around those words and what do they actually mean, which is basically the rules of engagement. How are things going to get done? And the 3rd, skills, knowing our innate skills, knowing the skills we can build overall for the functions of the team that we need, as well as number 4, a specific skill of problem solving, which includes the decision-making piece. And the 5th one, take a break and get out so that you can actually see how much of a bottleneck you are on your own. It's like the perfect little litmus test. And, and you're in the right place, because Voice of Bold Business Radio ultimately helps with all of these things. And there are so many other programs that you should take a look at. The ones with Stephanie and I are always going to have some element of these in it, most likely. We overlap and share that commonality there. How much more you want to impact your business directly relates on how much you think you are important and necessary to the business. Keep that in mind. You can be in your own way and be limiting the growth of yourself, your team, and your business. This has been Program 20, and you can find the program notes at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P20, or go to the website and search 5 ways to step out of the center of the business. And remember, it starts with you. You are not the center of the business where everything goes through you. You are the guide and the leader and the responsible party for the success of your business and your team. We'll do that. So check in with these 5 ways to step out of the center of your business and really get a sense of where you are today.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.